Hello, welcome back to the shop. Today I'm going to be running you through how I run through my bike in between rides, after I bring it home from full day's riding, just to get it ready for the next ride out. This is assuming that everything else is typically up to speed, as far as I'm assuming that my cables are properly lubed and the throttle's nice and clean. I'll be checking this stuff, and if I have to dress it, I will. But this is going to be just like a general run through on a bike that's just been good from week to week, and I'm just getting her ready for the next ride out. So I like to check the bearings, make sure the bearings are good and tight. Just make sure the bike doesn't have any jiggle. Lift up and down on the rear wheel while it's on the stand to see if there's any up and down play. On these YZ250s, if you feel the smallest, the ever so smallest amount of up and down play, what you can do is have someone lift up and down on the wheel while you put your finger on all the bearings and figure out where the play is coming from. If it's coming from this top bearing right up here, and it's just a very, very minute amount, it's almost unmeasurable, you can just feel a little bit, but it's like literally unmeasurable, that's okay. That's a symmetrical bearing in there, and they kind of get that little bit of up and down play right after braking. That's just how they are, so that is acceptable, and you'll be good there. But yeah, and check, as I was lifting up and down on it, if I feel any play too, it could even be from the swing arm. So you want to keep an eye on them things and just make sure everything's nice and tight. Grab the front wheel, make sure that's nice and tight. Feel the steering bearings. If you watch my suspension and chassis tuning videos, you'll know how I like to set my bearings up a little bit on the tight side, so there's just ever so light amount of friction. And that just kind of guarantees that the bearings are tight enough so the bike is nice and stable, because as soon as you set it up to where there's no friction, you don't know if there could be just a little bit of play amplified down there. But once you have this tight enough where there is a little bit of friction, that pretty much assures you that there's going to be no play, because any amount of play will get amplified at the front wheel, which will make the bike feel a little unstable. So I already checked all the bearings. They seem to be good. These like to come loose, so just grab it, make sure it's still tight. If it's come loose, you tighten her up. Also, same thing with rear brake lever. Just make sure that bolt down there stay tight. Them do like to come loose sometimes. Of course, give your brake pads a once over. Just make sure they're still holding up well. And check for any fork seal leaks or anything like that might have popped up. A lot of the stuff that I just ran through right here, you're probably going to notice anyway while you're washing the bike after the full day's riding. But in case you didn't, just run through it one more time and make sure everything's good. Okay, now we're going to move right on to a oil change, transmission oil change. But before I remove the bike off the stand to drop the motor oil, I'm going to check the chain and see if it needs to be tightened up here. Some people go by the 3 fingers, 4 fingers, or whatever. But the thing is this little roller right here, this takes up some slack when the bike is on the stand and the rear end is fully extended. You can see how the chain is at a little bit of an angle right here. As these wear out, it will take up less slack, and if you put a new one on, it'll take up more slack. You see when I pick this up right here, watch what happens over there. See how the chain tightens up? How it tightens up when I pick this up. So you can see how using fingers over here, 3 fingers or 4 fingers, the wear of this is going to change how many fingers it takes to find that perfect setting. Also the wear right here. But one thing that doesn't change is when the bike is on the ground and the suspension is compressed to the point where the front sprocket, the counter shaft right here, and the swing arm pivot bolt and the rear axle, when you get them in a straight line, when you compress the rear end to right about there, where that's at a straight line going right here all the way to there, that's the tightest your chain's going to be throughout the whole stroke of the suspension travel. So that's actually the spot that you want to pay attention to, and you want to adjust the chain to the point that it's nice and tight at that point where the swing arm, all 3 of these reference points are in a straight line. And then you should just have a little bit of wiggle, and that's the best place that you can that you should check it. So since I have to pull her off the stand to change the oil, that's when I'm going to check the chain and see if I should adjust it a little tighter or not. Alright, so I have the bike off the stand, just sitting on a triangle stand. I'm going to walk up to the bike, press down on the rear end and try my best to compress the rear end to where them 3 reference points that I mentioned a minute ago are in a straight line, and I'll check the chain tension. Okay, it's not bad. She's a little on the loose side, but not bad, totally acceptable. However, I will tighten it up just a notch, but I'll get to that in a minute. I'll get to that when I have her back on the stand. As for right now, I'm gonna drop the oil while I have her off the stand. Okay, let's drain the oil. This is a YZ252 stroke. If you have a 4-stroke or some other bike, the method will be a little bit different to change the oil. This video is really not about how to change your oil. I'm just showing you the steps that I do. So every bike can be a little bit different, but I follow these same steps on every bike for the most part. There we go. And I use a magnetic drain plug on pretty much every bike I own. I have reasons why I do that. It's not only to catch the metal debris that might come off the off the transmission and inside the motor, but it also gives me a heads up if I'm approaching a transmission failure. If I see a big piece of metal stuck here, a corner of a gear or anything like that, I wouldn't be riding this bike this weekend if I found anything besides just normal metal dust. You can see it's just like a metal dust. As long as it's a metal dust stuck to the magnet, that's pretty normal. These transmissions are always shedding a little bit, so that's good. So I'm going to let her drain. Angled on this side, I have the triangle stand on the left side of the motor. Then once it stops dripping that way, I'll put the triangle stand on the other side of the bike and kind of tilt the bike to the other side. You get all the oil out. If you have it tipped one way and then you tip it the other way, just to get all the oil out. Meanwhile, I'm going to clean this up. Alright, I have that cleaned up and ready to go. And I went ahead and shifted the bike to lean to the right now to finish draining the oil out of her. You can see she's back to dribbling. So I'll let that drain the last little bit out, and then we'll put the drain bolt back in. Okay, gonna put the drain bolt back in now. Now when you tighten up these drain bolts, you don't want to over tighten them and strip out the cases, especially if you're like me and you're changing your oil pretty consistently. That's a lot of times that you're gonna have to thread this thing in and out, and you don't want to strip it out, but you also don't want it too loose that it vibrates out, so keep that in mind. I like to bottom it out and just feel it. Once I can't turn it anymore without a ton of force, I pretty much know she's bottomed out. I just snug it against that, and that usually does good enough. If you have a 4-stroke and you change your oil, you typically have an oil filter. I don't change the oil filter on every oil change on my 4-stroke. It's just an oil filter, and if you change it every time, you'll notice it is clean still, as long as your motor's in good shape. I change that out just every so often, maybe every 2 months or so. Then I change out the oil filter, because I do change the oil after every full day's riding on my YZ450. It only holds 850 cc's of oil, and I usually put about an hour and a half on the bike on a good day out. So I change the oil. I do the oil filter about every 2 months or so, and even then it comes out pretty nice and clean. But it saves money. The oil filters add up after a while. Every week doing an oil filter, when it's just a filter and it's still clean, it's just there to catch something, especially if your motor really started going south, then it can start collecting stuff. And while you have the filter out, it doesn't hurt to cut the filter open and see if you have any gold particles in it or brass colored particles in it on your 4-stroke. That usually indicates that you have a lower rod bearing that's starting to come apart. But anyway, we have this thing capped off, so let me go ahead and put her back on the stand and we'll fill her up with oil. And again, this video is not to tell you how to change your oil, but I will just brush up on a few things. Most bikes do tell you how much oil go in it, like this one says 750 cc's. However, that's for like a completely dry motor, like if you rebuilt the motor and it's completely clean. I'm only going to put 700 in here because you never get every drop of oil out, so I'm just going to put 700. They do have an oil level check bolt right here, but on these YZ250s, it's been known for a long time that check bolt is really not in the right place. I forgot if it leaves your oil high or low. I forgot which one it was, but this is the same clutch cover they pretty much used since 1999, and since then they've changed some stuff inside the motor, from the clutch basket to some transmission parts and stuff, and they take up less or more volume, and it's kind of changed the oil level based on how many cc's you put in it. So general consensus is that's not really in the right spot anymore. I just throw 700 cc's in here. Every bike's a little different. Your 4-strokes, you might have your little window that you can use. And obviously, if you're doing it on a 4-stroke with the window, you want to start it up, let it run for about a minute, shut it off, and recheck it. But let me go ahead and get 700 cc's of oil. Everyone has their favorite oil. I personally like to use Shell Rotella 1540 diesel oil. It's a really good oil. Still has all the good stuff in it, zinc and everything like that. I got 700 cc's in there, so let me go ahead and pour that in. All right, I just poured that in. Go ahead and cap her off. And then we'll move to the next thing. Before I forget, let me go ahead and check the tire pressure. It's another thing I like to do on a week-to-week basis before I take her back out. Let's see. I personally like to run 10 psi in my tires here in Florida. On a 252 stroke. On a 450 I run 11. Everyone has their own preference. Some people like running 12, 13. Some people like running as low as 9. I know Bubba Stewart was asked one time what psi he runs in his tires, and he mentioned that he runs 9. They asked him why, and he said that was because that's what Dunlop told him to run. But as you know, when you run as low as 9, I've done it, it does feel good. But you will abrade your inner tubes a little bit quicker and sooner, and you might get flats a little bit sooner. And it's also easier to dent your rims. I found for me on a 252 stroke, 10 is a good number. I don't have to worry about the rims getting dented, and my inner tubes last me the whole life of the tire, so that's good. On the 450, I found I had to run 11 because I was denting the front rims every so often, putting little dents and dings in them. So I started running 11, that went away. However, for a pro racer to run 9, that's okay, because as you know, they get as many rims as they want, and they have a personal mechanic change their inner tubes as needed. They also always have a new inner tube, I imagine, which a little bit of abrasion on a new inner tube, it's not going to cause a flat. Where if you run a tire a full life with one inner tube at very low pressure like 9, it can abrasion the inner tube to the point that it just digs a hole through it and you get a leak. So anyway, got this one at 10. Let's see, I guess I'll go ahead and knock out the chain. We'll save the air filter for after that. For me to tighten up the chain on a week-to-week basis as needed, I don't have to sit here and line up the marks at left and right to make sure that the back tire is true and straight. I don't really have to worry about that because I know she's already aligned. Usually I like to line it while the marks are meeting each other, and then from there, you see the flat spot of the 10 millimeter right here. Every time I go to tighten the chain, I count flat spots. So like right now, I'm going to tighten this chain up 2 flat spots. So this flat spot right here on the 10 millimeter, I'm going to spin it until 1, 2, and then I'll go to the other side, do the same thing, 1, 2, pushing the rear wheel back. I won't have to check the left or right and make sure it's equal, because I know it's equal right now. So if I spin them both just 2, it's going to be equal and just slide the whole rear wheel back. So let me go ahead and do that. Before I loosen the axle up, I'm going to loosen up these 12 millimeters right here that lock and the adjustment bolt. It's best to do that now so nothing can move. That way this stays at its point. Alright, have that loose. Now I'm going to loosen the axle. There we go. You saw how I actually tightened it back up a little bit there. I don't like to loosen up so much where everything's loose and then the back wheel just slides back or whatever. I like to have still a little bit of friction so that it stays pressed hard against the adjustment nut here. So I'm gonna adjust this side 2 flat spots, and I'm gonna adjust the other side 2 flat spots. 1, a little bit more, 2. 2, 1, 2, and now I'm going to tighten up the axle nut. All right. I'm going to pop her off the stand and recheck the chain tension now that I have adjusted her. And that's perfect. I'll leave her right there. Let me go ahead and tighten them 12 millimeters back up, since I won't have to make any more adjustments. I'll hold the 10, just hold it locked up against the axle block and tighten up the 12. Do the other side. And there we go, the rear wheel is ready to go. The chain is properly set. I have several air filters. I can clean one while I'm using one. I have a few of them. But anyway, here's a short little clip of how I clean them. Then it's time to get the air filter clean. I just go ahead and throw it in the laundry washer. And put a, just like if you're washing a load of laundry, I use a full cup of laundry detergent. Oh, shoot, it's hard to do this with one hand. Let me do this. There you go. I have the luxury of having 2 washing machines, one for our normal clothes, the other one I consider my dirty washer or shop washer. But before I was married, I actually owned this washer right here alone, and I used to wash my air filters in it and then also wash my clothes. What I would do is, after washing the air filters, I'd run the washer a cycle with laundry detergent in it, but nothing else. Just a blank cycle to clean the washing machine, so to say. I never had any issues with anything being on my clothes or anything like that. The washing machine was able to wash itself. I usually just put it on light. It doesn't take that long. Warm is okay. You don't want to do hot, and I could do small. And when they come out nice and clean, and all I have to do is just let them dry and oil them up. You know, there are other ways to clean your air filter. Okay, let me pop this seat off and get the air filter out of there. Alright, try to lift the air filter up to avoid dropping any dirt into the intake boot that I might have to clean out. It's often easier said than done. And I cleaned the dirt that's just kind of right around on the lip here. Trying to sweep it away so it doesn't fall into the intake tract. I don't use grease on my air filters around the lip. I'll show you why in a few minutes here. I'll show you how I do it. And I get a full life out of my motors. No dirt typically ever gets into my motor. Alright, got that all cleaned out. I mean, the air box is dirty, but that's okay. Any dirt that's in this air box, as long as it doesn't make it to the filter, we're good. While I have the seat off, I wanted to point something out. I like to put a strip of shoe goo. You can get it at Walmart. This is actually black shoe goo, but you can get clear shoe goo as well. I put a strip there, here, any contact points where your seat contacts the bike, because they have a tendency to just wear right into this aluminum right here, where the seat presses against it. Right here, here, and here. They have a tendency to wear into there. I don't have to put it here because it's resting against, or here, because it's resting against the soft shoe goo, which is like a rubber glue. You can get it in the shoe department at Walmart. Shoe goo, G-O-O. And that's really good to put on any spot of your bike where there's abrasion and it wears into it. Okay, I'll go ahead and remove the dirty air filter out of the cage. I'm going to try my best to keep the cage clean as I do this, so I don't have to clean it every time. And I'll take a rag and I'll just look for any dust on it or dirt. If I see anything anywhere, I'll just try to wipe it up. If you get it real dirty, then you might have to spray it with brake cleaner or whatever and get it cleaned up. But as long as you take your time. What I like to do, I use uni filters, and they're a 2-piece filter. I typically, while the filter is dirty, which this one, wow, it didn't get that. I usually get them a lot dirtier than this. I like to separate them and see how much dirt has made it through. I don't see any dirt really has gotten through it. That just kind of lets me know how well I've been oiling these filters and if they've been doing their job. If it doesn't make it to the second layer, you can pretty much rest assured it's not even making it to the inside of the motor, which is good. And now I will swap gloves, so I have clean gloves to oil the clean filter. Alright, this is the air filter I pulled out of the washing machine. When you wash them in the washing machine like that, it does get rid of all the dirt, but if you're using a really tacky oil, which you should, I use the lube foam air filter oil. Another tacky one is the PJ1 foam air filter oil. You want to use a tacky oil, and if you use a tacky oil, a lot of times when you wash them using regular soaps like I did, the dirt will come out, but a lot of the oil will actually stick around on the filter. So you don't have to like go crazy with a ton of oil after you've already oiled the filter one good time, because it doesn't always all wash off. It leaves a residue behind that's still good. This is really tacky oil. As it dries up, it's still wet right now. Dry it up a little bit. Well, it gets really tacky. That's the point. It's not really. I'm kind of unable to show you right here. But if you like to spray your oil on, definitely use the PJ1 foam air filter oil. If you don't mind putting gloves on like I'm doing here and rubbing it on with your hand, then the Yama lube's good. I'm not a fan of some of the other filter oils that are not tacky. I find they don't grab the dirt as well, and it doesn't stick to the filter as well. I like the tacky stuff myself. But that's all you do. You just rub it in. Try to get every corner, especially down here. You want to make sure you get it down there. That's the hardest spot to really work it into. And then, like I said, I don't use grease on the lips of my seal. I just make sure I use filter oil on it, right? Just get it, some filter oil on it, because if the oil is supposed to stop it from going to the filter, it'll stop it from squeezing through here too. And if you have a gap on your bike where you actually need grease to fill the gap, then you actually got a bigger problem. And you're gonna want to figure that out. The grease just makes a mess. And like, this filter's already been oiled in the past and used and cleaned and used and cleaned. So I only really just have to brush it up with a little bit more oil. If it was a brand new filter, I would completely saturate the inside and the outside edges. I mean, the inside and the outside panels. But because this has been oiled so many times, I'm really mainly just worried about the outside on both the outside of both the filters. If this was not a 2-piece filter, like if it was like a twin air, I would definitely make sure I oil, if you're doing it by hand like I am, or even spraying, I would oil the inside and the outside of the filter. But since this is a 2-piece filter, I'm just going to oil the outside of both. There we go. This filter also has a blue dye to it too, so you can tell where you got it on the filter and where you haven't. Although after a few times, it just always looks blue after a while. The dye kind of sticks around. Oh, I mentioned earlier I change my oil, my YZ450 after every full day's riding. I'm a YZ250 2-stroke because it's only a transmission oil. I typically run that about 3 full days riding. I just base it on how dirty it looks when it comes out. Like on my wife's bike, her 125, she doesn't ride as hard as I do. So I could run her oil for like 6 or 8 weeks of riding, and it still comes out pretty clean looking. But mine, after the 3rd day of riding, that's when it starts coming out dirty, and I like to change it before they actually start coming out really dirty, so that way I know I wasn't riding on dirty oil. Okay, let's go pop her on the bike. While I'm doing this, The reason I like the uni filters, I prefer the uni filters, is because they are a two-piece filter for the most part on most of your models. Some of them, they are one piece, the uni, where they can't really make it two-piece. But most of your model is a two-piece filter, and the beauty of that is most filters are a dual-stage filter, meaning the inner foam has tighter, smaller holes in it, more coarse, and the outer filter has bigger holes in it. And they glue them two together. That glue gluing them two panels together. It can create a slight flow restriction. So I prefer having the uni that it's a two-piece filter, because they don't have that adhesive between the two layers, which means a better flow. Yep. What I like to do after I get it on is I slide my hand around the lip all the way around. I slide to make sure that it's sealed up against the air box, and there's no openings or it didn't pop out at any place that you can't really see. So you run your hands around there to see. All right, I have the seat back on. One thing you're not going to see me do in this video is lube the chain. If you watch my bike washing video, I don't really like to put chain lube on my chains. I live here in Florida, and it's a lot of sand, and the chain lube causes the sand just to stick to the chain, which can't be good. Really, all I want to do is control rust. So after I'm done washing the bike, I use WD-40, and I just pretty much drench the chain with WD-40, and that pretty much is my chain lube. It keeps it from rusting, keeps it from squeaking for the most part, and it dries up and dirt doesn't stick to it. So and it keeps a mess from chain lube mess. If you look in here, you'll notice that it's pretty clean up in here. I don't have chain lube kicking around making a mess on everything. I find I get the same amount of life out of my chains whether I use chain lube or WD-40, so I'm just going to choose the cleaner route and use WD-40. And the last thing that I would check, if you'd like to check, is the radiator fluid. Especially on the 4-strokes, they have a tendency, we don't have reservoirs on these bikes, so as they get hot and the water expands, it'll push water or coolant out of the overflow. On these dirt bikes, it just drops it on the floor. There's no reservoir to collect it so that it can put it back in the radiators when things cool back down. These 2-strokes don't get as hot, so they don't really push as much water out the overflow. But what I like to do is either check it, or this is how I do it. When I get to the track and I start the bike up and I'm warming the bike up, as it's warming up, I'll place my hand on top of the radiator right here and feel the temperature. And if I start feeling it get warm and hot as the bike's warming up, that indicates to me that it is full of coolant. Because if the coolant level's low, the top of the radiator is not going to get hot. So I never have to pop the radiator cap off. It's just when I go to warm up the bike, when I get to the track, that's how I do it. I just stick my hand on the top as I'm warming up, and I feel for temperature. And that's pretty much it. I know this is kind of a corny video, but I mean, I do realize there are people just getting into this sport, and videos like this can help them out. And at the same time, if you have been in this for a while, it can be interesting to see how other people do it. But I guess that's it. I appreciate you guys watching this, and I'll catch you later.